Yeah, it is live now. You can start.
Okay. A very good evening to one all present here. I, Yashashvi Tiwari, on the behalf of UPS Cloud Security Alliance, welcomes you all to today's session on Azure Fundamental Explained, a hands-on experience. UPS Cloud Security Alliance student chapter was founded in 2017 and is a part of international research organization Cloud Security Alliance, which promotes best practices and industry-level certifications in the field of cloud and security. It gives me immense pleasure to tell you that UPS Cloud Security Alliance happens to be the first student community to this prestigious international organization under its Uttarakhand branch. Also, I would like to share with you all that we have collaborated with AWS User Group Dehradun, AWS Educate Student Community India, NVIDIA, Code Warriors, and give my certificate to provide It is a moment of sheer delight that we have Mr. Ryan O'Connell. Currently, he is working as a senior information technology consultant at Green Gorilla. Previously, he worked as a global senior engineer at MacWed Limited. He is a senior solution architect and masters at Cloud Computing and Troubleshooting with experience of more than 16 years in the industry. We are really glad to have you with us today. I would like to invite Ryan O'Connell to begin the session.
Thank you so much for that nice introduction. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time to tune in. And you'll find that the lesson we're going to do is going to be around real-world things that you need to know. So it's going to be slightly different from your standard textbook training. So I'm going to kick off. I'm going to just share my screen. And give me a second. And I'll just give me a second. I'm just trying to share my screen here. And screen one. And allow. Cool. So I'm just going to move this over. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, right. Let's get into it. Let's get going. So what is Azure Cloud Computing in a nutshell? Again, it's a high-level overview. Just a little bit about me before we get going. I've been doing IT for 16 plus years. I've done work for HP, Microsoft, the New Zealand Defence Force, the CIS branch, which is Communication Information Systems, just to mention a few. I've been an IT trainer and IT manager for some of New Zealand's biggest training centers. I've also designed IT solutions and migrated a wide range of organizations and IT infrastructure into the cloud from small to enterprise businesses. I've worked in the United States, China, UK, Canada, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Australia, and New Zealand. I hold current and multiple certifications with Microsoft, AWS, VMware, Citrix, EC Council, Apple, Cisco, Palo Alto, Fortinet, ITIL, SDI, and we can go on and a few more. So just before we go, I just want to give a shout out to Tech Skills in Australia. They help IT graduates who graduate out of university. They help them find jobs in Australia, and they provide the real-world hands-on experience, because the problem that we have in the industry is we get IT graduates that qualify in university. They go out into the real world and they struggle to get a job because they don't have real-world hands-on experience. So they are providing this. Prasanna and Baraj are doing an amazing job, and they're doing something unique that's never been done before in Australia. So I just wanted to let them give a shout out to them, saying they're doing an awesome job by helping people get that hands-on knowledge, and then also helping to place them in jobs so that they can actually start their careers in IT. Another shout out is with Kevin or KevTech in the USA. He specializes in help desk training, including cloud. I've done a lot of training with him. With Kevin and myself, we've managed to place 450 students. And we're talking about IT graduates. We're talking about people that have been made redundant. We're talking about people that have decided to have career changes. And we have found them jobs around the USA. And he has a little YouTube channel, and he has over 19,000 subscribers. And he is doing an amazing job. And again, he does his channel. He doesn't charge anything. He does it all for free. He's just awesome. And then another shout out is to Michael Rufizzo. He's been 18 years in the Navy, in the United States Navy. And he specializes in setting up LinkedIn profiles and setups for people that have left university that are trying to get their profile out onto LinkedIn so people can hire them. He's also does IT training in terms of security and project management and leadership. He also helps with personal development and other IT skills. So as you can see, his links, his LinkedIn link is there on the below. I would encourage you to try and touch base with him and Kevin and a few other people, because there are a lot of people out there that want to help and get people to the next level, especially IT graduates that have left university or left school and are looking to get into IT and, you know, getting their first job. So what is Azure Cloud Computing in a nutshell? Let's begin. The labs that we're going to do, we are going to create an Azure tenant. We are going to do a portal service overview. We'll talk about custom domain names and resource groups. We'll create a user in Azure Active Directory and reset a forgotten user password. We will create a virtual machine in the portal, and we will create a virtual machine using the CLI. We'll also talk about how to reset that password. We will create a VNet or a virtual network. We're going to deploy a container. We are going to deploy a web app. We are going to create a file share, and we are going to map that file share to a Windows desktop as a mapped drive. We're also going to create some blob storage. We'll do a bit of an overview, and we'll do an overview of Storage Explorer. Again, it's just some fundamentals to get you to grips with Azure and to give you a taste of what Azure is. So let's get cracking. So what is Azure? Azure is not a lovely shade of sky blue. Microsoft Azure is one of the largest cloud computing platforms, serving millions of applications, integrations, and customers. Microsoft Azure is a public cloud platform. It offers more than 200 products and services accessible over the public internet. This collection of service or services, as Microsoft put it, is designed to help bring new solutions to life and solve today's challenges and problems. When did Azure begin? Azure was announced in October 29 and started with the code name Project Red Dog. It was released on February the 1st, 2010 as Windows Azure before being renamed to Microsoft Azure on March the 25th, 2014. Microsoft Azure has grown to become a major cloud computing player. As of 2021, Azure has 20% of the market share, and it's growing, with AWS at 31% and Google Cloud Platform at 9%. At this current time, Azure has 67 available and announced regions globally, more than 160 physical data centers, and numerous availability zones, and millions of users and companies using their products every day. So cloud computing refers to the delivery of computing services over the internet or cloud. The cloud computing services made available include servers, networking, databases, storage, analytics, and software. Again, cloud computing offers organizations faster innovation, flexibility, economies of scale, because you generally only pay for the cloud service you use. And this lowers the operating costs, allowing you to run your infrastructure more efficiently, and you can scale up your business, scale it down. Most importantly, you can save costs. The key benefits of cloud computing is you can save money by reducing costs. You can scale to suit your business needs. Of course, you get increased productivity. You get reliability and high availability. You have speed and agility. It has amazing security and, of course, improved performance. The reduced cost eliminates the capital expenditure of buying hardware and software and building and running those physical data centers. It lets you get away with racking and stacking servers. You don't have to rack and stack and buy a server and throw it in there. Again, it reduces the amount of IT staff it takes to manage your on-prem infrastructure. You don't need so many IT staff to manage it. Again, cloud computing is a consumption-based price, meaning you're only charged for what you use. This is popularly known as the pay-as-you-go rate, and it's you pay for what you use. You can also get a fixed price where you can provision resources and you're charged a certain price for those instances, whether you use them or not. And fixed pricing, again, can save company big money depending on what it is you want to lock down in your Azure agreement with Microsoft. Of course, we have CapEx and OpEx. Instead of paying up front for resources like servers and switches, and of course then filling out a capital expenditure form come tax time, these same resources can be filed as operating expenses or OpEx. OpEx is a business expense incurred to generate long-term benefits in the future, like buying fixed assets such as servers, printers, air conditioners, generators, network switches, cabling. And the maintenance of these items is also considered CapEx as well. So again, OpEx is an expense incurred to run the day-to-day business, and these include things like printer cartridges, paper, electricity. It even includes website hosting and domain registrations. So it just goes to show you how pricing has changed. And this is important when you're designing a network or you're migrating infrastructure from on-prem into the cloud, or just moving purely into the cloud domain on its own. Of course, speed and agility. Cloud computing services usually are self-serve and are offered on demand. Organizations can provision a large amount of computing resources in minutes with just a couple of mouse clicks, 1, 2, and that virtual machine is up and running. The speed at which you deploy resources, you can get an organization up and running quickly, and allows companies to be agile and flexible. In other words, in the past, you'd have to order a server, the server would come, then you need to install the OS on it, and then you need to prep it and patch it and then push it out. Where now, with cloud computing, I can provision that server and get it out into production within 10 minutes. It's live and people can start using it. Of course, we have scalability. I mean, cloud services are built to scale, so they can scale up or down or in and out to suit your needs. You get access to the amount of compute power, storage, bandwidth when you need it, and in the geographical region you need it in. If you need more computer power, you get it. If you need less computer power, you get less. And this is referred to as global scale. Of course, being productive is very important. Cloud computing removes the need for racking and stacking and allows IT teams and engineers to spend their time on important goals instead of putting servers into racks and wiring them up. You know, they can spend more time on deploying resources, maintenance, analytics, and troubleshooting. Of course, performance is important. Cloud computing services run on a worldwide network of secure data centers. And these are generally upgraded to have the latest generation of hardware by the cloud provider. Cloud solutions offer many benefits, including network latency for applications and greater economies of scale. Of course, high reliability and availability is important. Cloud computing makes data backups, disaster recovery, and business continuity easier and less expensive. This is because the cloud can be mirrored to multiple redundant sites on that cloud provider's network. Load balancing can be used to improve reliability around solutions that are built on cloud services. And of course, Azure Site Recovery allows you to recover multiple workloads straight within the portal. So if something goes bump in the night, you can recover that straight away within the portal, and get it up and running, and your business won't be down. And this is important for businesses, because if a business goes down, they lose money. And not only that, it could damage their reputation. Of course, security is important. Cloud providers offer policies and technologies and controls that can strengthen your security posture. This helps to protect your data and infrastructure. Cloud solutions are often more secure in the cloud than those in a physical data center on-prem, because there are a lot more controls in place as to the controls that you may have on your on-prem server. And of course, some of the key benefits, guys, of cloud computing is reduced cost, speed, global scale, increased productivity, improved performance, reliability, and security. So if you remember that, you'll be pretty much on your way. Again, some of these things that I've shown you in the PowerPoint slides are actually interview questions as well. When you go for an interview, someone will say, well, what's cloud computing? Oh, Azure or AWS is cloud computing. That's not what they want to hear. They want to hear cloud computing can save you costs. It can, give you speed. It can scale. It can give you better performance. It's got security. It's got reliability built into it. So these are all key things that you need to bear in mind, so that when you're going out there and you're looking for a job, you'll be able to successfully answer some of the questions in the interviews. Again, we're going to go straight through into the Azure portal, and we're actually going to start doing some stuff live. So what I'm wanting to get you guys to do, if you can, I would like you to log on to the Azure portal. If you've got an Azure portal, if you haven't, you can actually go to this hyperlink, and you can, which is https azuremicrosoft.com/en-eu free, and you could sign up for free. And you could click this free button here, and you get 12 months free services. Now, a lot of people have said to me, well, what happens after 12 months? You still can carry on using Azure. However, certain services will no longer be available to you unless you upgrade to pay-as-you-go. Then those services will become available and you can use them. But you can use Azure free for forever if you wanted to, but then you would find that you would upgrade to pay-as-you-go. So you click this free button. Once you've clicked this free button, it will take you to a page like this. Mine is like this because I already have an Azure account. But then if you do get this page, you can say sign up for a pay-as-you-go subscription. If you don't have a pay-as-you-go subscription, this will ask you to sign up for a free subscription. And you can sign up for that free subscription, and you'll be good to go. And it's going to ask you to accept the agreements, and then you would go ahead and you would say next, and then it would ask you for a bunch of numbers, and you'd go ahead and you would type in those numbers. It would then send you a text to your phone to verify, to say, right, Ritesh, you signed up for this. You gave me this phone number. I'm going to text you to confirm you are who you say you are. It's going to ask you for your credit card as well. And I'm talking about doing signups in a live environment, not in a university environment. I'm talking about when you leave university or your college and you go out and you work in a company. A lot of companies still haven't migrated to the cloud. They may want to migrate to the cloud. So you need to know how to set up that infrastructure so that company can have their tenant. So once you've set up your infrastructure and you log into your Azure portal for the first time, you would be presented with your portal. Obviously, you wouldn't have any of these in there because your portal would be brand new. So this is called the Azure portal. Again, you could just type https portal.azure.com. That is one of the exam questions in the AZ900. I've trained hundreds of people on IT, and I've trained quite a few people on Azure. And those that have gone and written their fundamental exams, 90% of them have had this question. So it's really important that you know where to go. So once you log into Azure, this is your portal. If we quickly scoot over to the Azure services, this gives you all the services that Azure have. Of course, if we come down to computing, You can see we've got computing, we've got all the different storage. Now, if you have a look at a service in Azure and it says it's in preview, that means it's about to be released to the public. It's about to go live. So you can test drive it and see. 9 times out of 10, when it's in preview mode, you'll find Microsoft will make some good changes to enhance the improvements on what that certain part of that service can do to benefit you. If you wanted to see all the services, you could click all and you could scroll down. Now, Azure is not just for IT admins. It's for database people. It's for developers. It's for so many ranges of qualifications in the industry. So you might say, well, I want to become a network specialist. Well, Azure does networking. You want to become AI and become a developer and learn artificial intelligence. It has all of that stuff built in. It's got security. It's got DevOps. And you can see there's so many services out there. And you can see a lot of stuff would be in preview. That's because that's a new feature that's been added. Sometimes you may see a feature there and then the next day it's gone. It's because probably it wasn't that popular or Microsoft are working on it before they release it again. So this is where all of these services are. And like I say, it's huge. You can't be an expert in everything. As you start doing your AZ 900 certification, that will give you a grounding to decide where do you want to go down networking, do you want to become a developer, what is the case or what is the qualification that you want. So there's a lot of things that it does. So we're going to kick off with Azure and we're going to go straight to Active Directory. Now, a little tip, let's say if you come into storage and you select the storage, if you highlight over the storage, you see I've got this little star here. If I click that star, it will add that recovery service to my favorites automatically. And as you can see, there it is. My recovery service vault is there. And you can click on that and you could drag this recovery service vault up to wherever you want it, wherever you want it to have it. So if you don't want it there anymore, you can actually remove that little tick and that'll take it out of your favorites menu. So knowing little tips like that will help you to drive Azure a lot better. So the first thing we want to do is we want to go, like all good people, let's go and create a virtual machine. And again, I don't know how things are done in your part of the world, but in the United States, in Canada, in the UK, New Zealand, and Australia, when an IT graduate goes for an interview to say, I'm looking for a job in cloud computing, the interview is done in a few stages. First of all, they'll ask you some interview questions to see what you know. Then they'll call you back for a technical test. And that technical test could involve some more technical questions, but 90% of the time, it's going to say they will give you a sandbox. In other words, an isolated environment in Azure, and they will say to you, here's the sandbox environment, create a VNet, create a virtual machine, create a user in Active Directory, and let me see what you know. And you'll be surprised how many people can't do that. So I want you guys as graduates or people that are wanting to get into the cloud, I want you to learn real world things so that you can go out and apply what you've learned in the real world, and it will help you not only get a job, but it will help your reputation as an engineer or as an Azure person excel. So in order to create a virtual machine, we can actually come up here and you can find virtual machines in your portal. If you don't see virtual machines here, that's not a problem. Just go to the top here and type in VIR, and it'll bring you up everything that you want. So we want virtual machines. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click a virtual machine. And this is where we create our virtual machines. And I want to show you something before we move on to here. If I click create, and this is an important thing to note, it's asking us to create a resource group. And the reason we create a resource group because it puts everything into that resource group. Think of a resource group as a folder. It puts everything into that folder and it's easy to manage. Now you can create a resource group from here, But, I've trained all my guys and I've trained other people. And how we do it in the industry is we don't normally just go here and create a resource group because we'll have hundreds of resource groups. So I always encourage people to go straight to the resource groups here. And we're going to go ahead and let's create a resource group. So I'm going to click create. And let's just call this VM Lab 01. That's the name of our resource group. We can choose whatever region you want. Obviously, if you're in India, you'll select India. If you're in the United States, you'll select United States. So you can scroll all the way down and select a region that's closest to you. It doesn't make sense to say, okay, well, let's select East US, and you actually creating all your stuff on a data center in the US. You want to reduce latency. You want to reduce the time it takes to access stuff. But in our case, as a lab, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to click next. And we can go and tag that. We can give it a name. For example, we can say VM Lab 01. And of course, we could say VM Lab if you wanted to. And you could say review. This will go away and do a validation. And a validation is just checking that you've done things correctly. And you'll get this nice green tick saying, yep, you validated, you're good to go. And we click create. And this will go ahead and create that resource group. Now, once that resource group has been created, we can now build our labs, build our virtual machines, build our VNets, whatever we want to do, and we can throw them all into this resource group. And as you can see, this resource group is empty. So we want to throw a virtual machine in there. So let's go ahead and click virtual machines. Click the create button. Select the drop down and say virtual machine. Now from the drop down here, let's go and select our resource group. So we'll select our resource group here, VM Lab 01. It's asking us to give our virtual machine a name. So I'll just call it VMFS, VMFS01 for virtual machine file server 01. It's asking us to put it in availability zone. We can accept the defaults. As you move through learning Azure, you can change this. You can create zones and redundant sets and scalability sets, but we're not going down that road. We're just getting our head around creating a virtual machine. Now, as you can see here, if I click this box here, this can bring up a whole bunch of virtual machines that I can choose from. You can see here I've got my Windows Data Center, I've got Linux, I've got Debian. That's a Windows 11 virtual machine that I've created running the latest operating system. But in our case, we want to use server, so I'm going to just select that server there. If you wanted to see all the images, you could click see all images, and this will take you to the marketplace, and we can now scroll down and see all the images that we want. But in our case, we just want to use a Windows Server, so I could select that, and we'll be good to go. And of course, if I select Windows Server, you can see all the different server images that you may want to use when you are setting up your virtual machine. And some of the servers come with containers, some don't come with containers, you get core. So it's something just to be aware of when you are creating your virtual machine. So we're going to stay with our 2019 server. Again, if I select this drop down as well, I can select the different types of resources. And of course, you can see each time I go down in memory or down in resources, I'm being charged. And the reason I'm showing you this, it's important because when you come to build and develop your resources and push them out, it costs the company money. Now, bear in mind, this says this is going to cost me 100 New Zealand dollars to run per month. But that is if I leave this virtual machine running 24 hours a day for the whole month, day and night, that's what I'd be charged. But I'm going to show you how to create a lab and create all these resources, and it won't cost you anything at the end of the day, maybe $10 or whatever the case is, or the price that you go and buy a cup of coffee is what it would cost you to run a real infrastructure. Obviously, in our company and in organizations that I've built, they have different budgets and have different costs involved, and they don't just have one server, they'll have 10 or 20 servers in their environment. So we want to go ahead and give our server an admin name. So I'll just call this AZ admin. Just type it in lowercase. AZ admin. We'll go ahead and type in a password. I'll go ahead and confirm that password. And then I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a bit here. Now, this is telling me that RDP is opened. And it's like, oh, you got RDP open. You know, you could be vulnerable to hacking. Well, you can actually lock that down with just-in-time access. It's not an issue. And we want RDP open because if we don't open RDP, how are we going to connect to our virtual machine? How are you going to remote desktop to your server to work on it? If you had a license and you owned a server license, you could click this and you could get a 50% discount off that pricing. So that server would then only cost me $50. And in some cases, I could get even a bigger discount. So I'm going to go ahead and go next on the disks. Now, by default, whenever you create a VM, it's going to go to premium SSD. And of course, that will cost you a little bit of money. So we don't need a premium SSD. I'm just going to use the standard because standard is great for dev testing. We're not worried about the IOPS or the speed of that disk or the throughput of it because it's just a lab. So obviously, I'll select a standard SSD. If you didn't want to do that, you could select HDD, and that would be even cheaper. So I'm going to accept that, and then I'm going to leave everything as the default. I'm going to go next. Now, by default, it's creating a VNet for me. It's calling that VNet VMLab VNet. It's giving me a /24 IP range, which is 256 IP addresses. But bear in mind, 254 IP addresses, sorry. But bear in mind, Microsoft reserved 5 IPs for their own use. You can't use them. Even though it'll say that you've got 254 addresses to use, you actually don't. You only have 250 or 249 because Microsoft use it. It's going to go ahead and create a public IP for us automatically. It's going to create us a basic network security group, and it's going to open this port for us as well. You could scroll down and you could open other ports if you wanted to, but we don't want to do that. We just want to leave RDP open. And of course, we can scroll down. If you had multiple machines, we could select load balancing, but we're not interested in doing that. We just want to get our VM up and running. And I'll go next. And of course, I'm going to turn off boot diagnostics because boot diagnostics allows me to remote into my virtual machine should I have problems with it booting up so that I can fix it. If any of you have ever used a server or played in IT admins, you would look at boot diagnostics as your IIM module that your IP admins would use to remote into that machine, into the BIOS of that server, and actually troubleshoot issues when the server's restarting so they can see what errors they have on post startup. Of course, if we had Azure Active Directory, we had RBAC setup or role-based access, we could go ahead and tick that as well. But again, I'm going to go ahead and click next. If we had any custom scripts, we could paste those scripts in there and those will run. Or if we had any extensions, we could go ahead and install those too. We're not worried about that, so I'm going to go next. It's asking us to tag stuff. We're not worried about tagging. We just want to go review and create. Now, is this creating the virtual machine? No. It's running a validation process. Once your validation process has successfully passed, you will get a nice green tick. You might get a red tick here saying something is wrong, and it'll highlight with a red line underneath here saying, well, you didn't put a password in or whatever the case is. And you could click on the basics and go back or click on disk, and it'll go and tell you what you've done wrong, and you can then fix that. Now we can create our virtual machine, and we just click create. Now, what Azure is going to do, it's going to go away and create that virtual machine. If you want to get technical, it's deploying the virtual machine. So deploying and creating is the same thing. We get this nice little bell notification icon up the top here. And this bell notification icon tells us what we've done so far. It's like a little list that says, look, this is what you've done. If you don't want to see it, you can close that down, and we wait for it to deploy. Now, while it's deploying, this is another key thing, and it's very important to remember, people. We get our IP address, our public IP address, so that we can RDP into it. It creates a network security group. It creates a VNet for us. It creates a network card, and now it's building our virtual machine. So once our virtual machine has created, we can then go into our VM. We can download the RDP client, and we can remote desktop straight into that server and access it and use it as how we would use it in a general environment. And like I say, most companies that I've done work for have a mixture of on-prem or on-premises servers, and they have cloud. Now, are people going to move all over to the cloud? Let me tell you, to be honest with you, no, because companies have invested millions and hundreds of thousands of dollars on IT infrastructure, network switches, servers, backup devices in their infrastructure, and they won't move that all on-prem. There's some stuff that they can move on-prem, but also sometimes why people don't move stuff on-prem is for legal reasons and for data residency reasons. Let me give you an example. You may have data that has to reside in India. By the Indian government law, it cannot reside outside India. It has to stay in India. So there are many things why people won't go to the cloud, and there are many reasons why people will go to the cloud. But again, you want to have the best of both worlds, so hence having a hybrid environment. So now we've created our virtual machine. We can go to our resource, and this takes me straight to my server. And this is my VM. And as you can see, my VM is running. I can see what my public IP address is. I can see what server's running. I can come down here and I can get all the information, what disks I've got. I don't have Azure spot pricing or spot instances, so I'm not worried about that. If I had scaling, I've only got one availability zone. If I had auto scaling in, it might have 2 or 3 zones in there. If I had a scale set, it might have a minimum of 4 servers and then scale up to 5 servers or 6 servers, depending on demand. So now we've got our virtual machine up and running. Let's connect to it. So click the connect button, and now we can connect to it using RDP or SSH, and you could use the SSH in the Cloud Shell, or you could use PuTTY. But of course, as a Windows person, you want to have the graphical user interface. So we'll click download RDP client. Now this is giving us our public IP address. So I'm going to go ahead and download that RDP file. Now that RDP file has downloaded and it's saved it, so I'm going to go ahead and open that RDP file. And I'll just drag this over because it's opening up. Sorry, it's opening up on my second screen. I'll just bring it back over. And I'm going to go ahead and say connect. And it's now prompting me for my credentials. And those are the credentials that we created when we set up our virtual machine. So I used AZ admin. I'm going to go ahead and type in my admin password. And I'm going to go ahead and click connect. And it's prompting me for my certificate. And I'm going to go ahead and say yes. Sorry, I've got 2 screens, so it's opening up on another screen. So as soon as it's opened up, I will drag it over so that you can actually see it. There we go. I'm now remote desktopping into that server. I'll just make it a little bit bigger so we can actually see what's going on. And it is easy as that. And this is how you would deploy a single server into a production environment. If you're doing a migration, you might want to migrate your server over. You can see Server Manager is firing up. We'll just give it a second to do its thing, then we'll close it down. I'm just going to say no, I'm not too worried about that. I mean, you could click yes if you wanted to, and we just move over there, and we could turn that off because we don't want to be bothered with that notification, and we'll close that bad boy down. And as you can see, it's busy doing some stuff. And once it's done its thing, we can go ahead and close it down over here. And there's my Windows server. And obviously, if I go into File Explorer and I right mouse click on my PC and I go Properties, we will be able to see that it's a Windows server. It tells us what our hardware is. It's VM1. But I also want to show you something as well. And this is important. A lot of people don't know this, or if they do, they don't take heed. And I've seen IT admins and engineers get into trouble because of this. Now, by default, it's going to create your OS drive, which is your Windows drive, and it's going to create some temporary storage. Do not save important files or data to that temporary storage. That temporary storage is for Azure to collect their logs. I mean, Azure even give you a warning saying, don't save information here, because if something happens, there is no way to recover your data. So that's what temporary storage is used for. It's used for your logs. You don't go and put all your files in there. If you wanted to have your files in there, you would then add a data disk to that server, and then you could go ahead and put all your data on that data disk. So that's how you create a Windows virtual machine running in the portal. Again, I can go ahead and just close that down and click OK, and that'll close that down. Now, remember, I said to you that virtual machine, while it's running, we're being charged a small amount for it. And that amount can build up if you forget to shut it off. So we can go to our virtual machines by clicking virtual machines here, or again, we can come to the top here and type in VIR, select our virtual machines, select the VM we want. Now it's running. I'm going to go ahead and stop this because I want to show you something that's really important as well. Now, we need to stop the virtual machine and put it into a deallocated mode. If it's not deallocated and it's just stopped or paused, you're still going to pay for it. So you might say, oh, well, I've stopped my virtual machine and I'm not going to pay for it. Then you'll get a bill at the end of the month saying this virtual machine was on day and night for 30 days, so you're being charged for that. So what you want to do is you want to make sure it says deallocated, not deallocating, deallocated. Now, you can come up here and you can see it's stopping the virtual machine. So we'll just give it a second for it to stop. And then we will go ahead and confirm that that virtual machine has stopped. Now, it's stopped. And if you notice now, it says it's in a deallocated mode. So now that machine can stay in your lab and it's not going to cost you a single cent because you now have it in a deallocated state, which is great. So it's all good. So that's how you create a virtual machine in the Cloud Shell. In the portal. So in order to create a virtual machine in the Cloud Shell, we can do that as well. Cloud Shell is this little icon at the top here. And let me just give you a walkthrough on Cloud Shell quickly. Cloud Shell allows us to use both PowerShell and Bash. So if you're a developer and you do a lot of scripting and you create a lot of modules and you work in PowerShell, PowerShell gives you the opportunity to do that. And it's great. As you can see here, you can tell it's PowerShell because you get this familiar blue background. And you can say, well, that's fantastic. Now you might say to yourself, well, okay, how do I get into Bash? If you select this little drop-down menu here, this puts you into Bash. You're going to get a confirmation saying, are you sure you want to move into Bash? And we say, yes, I definitely want to move into Bash. So Bash is the Linux terminal, but also you can do a whole lot of cool things in Bash as well. So what we want to do is we want to create a virtual machine in Bash, and it's pretty easy to do as well. Again, it's one of the interview questions that a lot of IT companies ask. Can you create a virtual machine? People say, yep, I can create it in the portal. But the IT manager or the senior infrastructure person that's interviewing you might say, all right, I don't want it in the portal because everybody can do that. I want you to create it either in PowerShell or Bash. And again, you'll be surprised how many people don't know how to do that. So in order to create a virtual machine in the portal, in PowerShell, we need to go to our storage group. And what we need to do is I need to just drag this down a bit. and I need to get the name of my storage group. So I'm just going to copy this name, and I've got a little notepad file typed out to save time, and I will paste that notepad file in there so that you can see what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to close that down. I'm going to drag this back up here, and I'm going to drag these commands in, and I'm going to explain to you exactly what it is that I'm creating. Sorry, another thing I forgot is I need to get my virtual machine. We need to get our virtual machine name, so we can do that as well. So we'll do that as we get going, and we'll call it a different virtual machine name. So I'm just going to open up my notepad, and I'm going to paste this in here for you. So I'm going to bring this down and say copy, and I'm going to paste this in here. Now let me explain to you what this command is doing. Whenever you use the portal and you go into Cloud Shell and using whether it's Bash or PowerShell, you want to use AZ, which is Azure VM create. You want to create that virtual machine. We then need to put that virtual machine in a resource group. So you have to have that resource group. We're then going to give that virtual machine a name. We'll just call it WinVM2, and we'll choose Windows 2016 Data Center. I'm going to use this fantastic password, which obviously you don't use in the real world, and then I would use this username. So if you type in like azvm create space /, that ends the line and will automatically take you down to this, and you should see this, and you would type that in, put /, and that would get you going. And I would go ahead and press enter. Now, what this is going to do, it's going to go ahead and it's going to create that virtual machine for us. And it's going to put it into that same VM lab group. So it's pretty quick. Obviously, you would go in and you would change your password. The reason I made that really strong password is so that you could just see how it's done. Whatever you do, don't put a / at the end here because it won't work. It's then saying, well, what is the next command? So we don't need a / here. So we're going to say, well, that's it. We've finished. And we don't need to create any more commands. And you press enter. And this will go away and it will do the same thing. It's going to create a virtual network. It's going to create a network adapter. It's going to create an OS disk. It's going to create a network security group and a public IP address, and of course a VNet. So it's going to create all of that and throw that in there for us, and then we'll go ahead and we can RDP into that machine, and you'll have access to that. And if you want to be a good engineer, you need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to realize that some of the tools are more flexible than others. To give you an example, sometimes it's easier to create stuff in the portal because it gives you more flexibility and control, or is it more easy and flexible to create stuff in the command line or the Bash or PowerShell? PowerShell and Bash, a lot of engineers spend their time in there because they can run multiple commands at the same time and get resources up and running. And there we go. It's created our virtual machine really quick. It's put it in the East US location. That VM is running. It's given it a MAC address. It's given it a private IP address. It's given it a public IP address, and it's put it into that resource group. So we can say, okay, that's great. Let's go and actually see. First of all, has our virtual machine created? There we go. There's our virtual machine. It's created and it's running. So, and if you notice, we've got a different size. You can actually decide what size you want to use at the end of the day when you are deploying stuff. Let's go and look and see if that virtual machine is in our resource group, because you want to keep everything together so that it's easy to manage. So let's go to VM Lab and let's just close Cloud Shell down, and there we go. There is my VM1 and there is my VM2. So my servers are all in there. There's my network adapter. There's all my network security groups, and everything is named with a 2 at the end so we don't get confused which VM we are connecting to. So the same thing applies. We just go to virtual machines, and of course we would click on our VM we would go ahead and download that RDP client like we did before. We would download that file. It's a different RDP client. And then, of course, you can see it's VM2, not VM1. I'd open that file up. I'll just drag it over here. Let's close that down. And I'll just drag it over again. Then I'd go ahead and say connect. It's asking me for some credentials. That was AZ user. And that had that fancy password of P and SSW0RD 1, 2, 3, 4. And I could say connect, and that would go away. And as you can see, it's allowing me to connect to that virtual machine. Once it's opened up on my other window here, I'll just minimize it and drag it over quickly so that you can see we are now connecting to our virtual server. Exactly the same process that we did earlier on. And we can log in now and start using that virtual machine, or hand it over to whoever needs access to it and say, there you go, that virtual machine's up and running. And that took a matter of minutes. Can you imagine buying a server, putting it in a rack, installing the operating system, patching it, updating it, getting it connected to the network, testing it before you deploy it, how much time and resources that would cost? Where this is just done in a matter of minutes. There's your virtual machine, there's your server, off you go. So that's how easy it is to create a virtual machine. And again, this is how guys do it on a daily basis in the workplace. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down because we don't need to be access that anymore. And of course, one of the key things we want to do is we want to go back to our virtual machines, and we want to select that VM that's running, and we just want to go ahead and stop it. And we don't want to reserve a public IP address. If you reserve it, think of it as a static IP, you will pay for it. So in a training environment, you don't want to do that. Obviously, in a real world environment, you'd want to reserve your server's IP, because if you don't, when people connect to it and the IP address changes, they're not going to be able to access those resources. So it's pretty easy to use. So while that virtual machine is stopping, again, you look at the bell notification at the top here. It will tell you. So always be aware of your surroundings and what's going on around you. So I'm going to go ahead and close that while that's running. We'll just leave that to do its thing. Let's scoot over to Azure Active Directory. I've got it over here. Again, you could type in AAD for Azure Active Directory, and that will bring that up, and you can go into your Azure Active Directory. And Azure Active Directory is different to your on-prem Active Directory. It's not the same. There are two different Active Directories. Again, stuff is very similar, so we can go ahead and we can create a user. It's straightforward. I can say new user, and again, we've got an option to create a user or invite a user. Now, I'll explain this quickly. Inviting a user is where you want a third-party company or person to access resources that you give them permission to. It's called B2B. And again, we can cover that in another session down the line. We just want to learn how to create our sample user. Again, I can go ahead from my domain names here, and I can select what domain that person is going to be part of. So I might call this user, say, Kevin S. We'll give him his full name. We'll say Kevin Smith. And of course, we'll go ahead and type in Kevin, and we'll type in Smith. And we can scroll down. By default, Azure is going to generate a password. If you say show password, this will show the password. Or you can say, well, look, I'm going to go and create my own password because I can't remember all these funny passwords. So I'll go ahead and create a password. And my password is created. He's not part of any groups. We'll go and do that shortly. Of course, you can go ahead and you can choose a usage location. Where's that person located? You can go ahead and type in his department details, his manager details. But I'm just going to go ahead and click create because we just want to learn how to create a simple user. And as you can see, it's gone away and it's created that user for us, Kevin Smith. And if we go into Kevin Smith, we can see all the information about Kevin Smith. And of course, we can come down and start assigning him roles, setting up authentication methods, and other bits and pieces. We could edit stuff from here, and we could reset that person's password from here as well. And we can do the same thing in Cloud Shell. So we go back into Cloud Shell. And the reason it's gone to Bash is because I'm in Bash already. If I wasn't in Bash and I was in PowerShell, it would take me to PowerShell. So I'm going to go ahead and paste a command in here that I've typed out in Notepad. Again, we're saying AZAD user create. Display the name. We're going to call that user Lois Lane. We're going to give her a password of password2. She needs to have a user principal name, like at lois@rocketlabs.com or microsoft.com, because most people today, if they're in Active Directory, they'll have email access. So that's where that comes in, so that we can give them an email address. So that's standard even with your since Server 2008 and right up to 2019 and right up to Server Now 2022. So I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And that's going to go away. And look how quick that was. That created that user for us. And we can see that user has been created. Now it's piped everything out in this format. And this format is known as JSON. So I'm going to go ahead and just minimize this. And of course, we can go back into users. And you can say, well, where's my user? I've just created my user. Let's go and hit the refresh button. And there she is. There's Lois Lane. Now, let's say you were cleaning up Active Directory and you went along and you said, okay, I've got Lois Lane here, and you click delete because someone was talking to you. And you go, oh no, I've deleted that user. This happens every day in the real world. Well, how do I recover that user? Before, you'd have to run a whole lot of PowerShell commands and bash stuff. It was a bit of a complex process. Microsoft, thank you, Microsoft. They have now given us this little link here, deleted users. So we click on our deleted user. I can see there's my user. I can tick that and I could go ahead and click restore and say, yes, let's restore that user. I could then go back into users and there she is. We're back in business. So much easier. Those that have worked on a Windows server will appreciate this feature tremendously because they know what it's like when you delete a user. However, if I went down to Lois Lane here and I said, I'm going to go ahead and delete her again, and I said, yes, let's delete her, and I went into deleted items. If I went here and I said delete permanently, remember, delete permanently, all the use, you cannot retrieve it. It will be gone. Goodbye. So if I said do that, there's no ways I can retrieve it. Unless I have a backup of my data, then I can go ahead and retrieve it from a backup. If I don't, I'm in hot water. And the same if I go back into my users, and you'll get, this happens as well in the real world. Users will complain, I forgot my password, I can't log on. So you can go into that user and you can go ahead and let's close this down because we don't need that there. And I can go reset password. Now, this is something that you need to be aware of. If I said reset password, it doesn't give me an option to create a password. It gives me the password. And what I have to do is I have to copy that password and either text it to that individual and say, right, you can log on with that password. And when they log on, they'll put that password in. It's a temporary password, which means the user must change this password the first time they log in. So it'll ask them for that temporary password, and then it'll say enter a new password, and then they would type in the password that they want. If you had a P2 license, you could do what we call self-password reset, where the user can actually reset their own password so that you don't have to be bothered with doing this. Again, how do we create a group in our Active Directory? We can go down to Active Directory. We can select a group, and let's create a new group, and we can call this group training. But I want to show you something. We've got two options here. We can create a security group or a Microsoft 365 group. So if I had Microsoft 365 in my environment, I'll create a 365 group. Or do I want to create a security group? I don't have 365 running, so I'm going to create a security group. I'll just call this group training. And of course, you can go ahead and enter a description for the group. I'm a bit lazy, so I'm just going to copy and just paste that into there. We don't have any owners. If I had a P2 license, this would then be available to me. It's not available because I don't have a P2 or a P3 license. So that will allow me to do dynamic memberships. Obviously, I can't do dynamic memberships because I don't have that P2 license. So I click create, and it's going to go ahead and create that group for us. So now if I click on that group, this will bring me up information about that group. And as you can see, I've got no users, no members assigned to that group. If I went to members, I could go ahead and click add, and I could go ahead and search for my user or my member. And there's quite a lot of people you can search from as you go down here. So I might say Kevin Smith, or I can just type in KEV, and that'll bring up Kevin Smith. I could select Kevin Smith and click select, and that would go ahead and add Kevin to that group. Now, if I went back into groups and obviously went into my groups there, you can see now I have one user that's assigned to that group. So that's how you create a simple user and a group. And obviously you can assign licenses and role assignments and other group memberships. So that's absolutely brilliant. Another thing I wanted to show you is really important. Again, this is a real world interview question. Everybody I know that's gone for an interview has been asked this question. How do I list all my VMs? So obviously you can do this in Bash or PowerShell. I prefer Bash. Some people will prefer PowerShell. Now I can go ahead and I could type in a command, which I've got here already in Notepad. And if I do this, say list all my VMs, I can press enter. This will go ahead and list my VMs. And I'm like, well, it's in a JSON format. I can't read that. Your boss wants you to send him a list of all the VMs that you have in the environment. You can't send him that. He'll be upset with you. He's like, what is this? This is not what I asked for. Yes, it is. No, we have to work smart, not hard. So again, I'm going to use the up arrow key, and I'm going to use a nice little command, and I'm going to say output, and I'm going to say table. How cool is that? Now my boss can read that. There's the VMs, and it tells me exactly the name of the VM, the resource group, the location, and what zone it's in. And then I could obviously pipe that out to a text file and send it to him, or pipe it out to a CSV file and send it to him, and he'll have it in an Excel format. So again, these are little tips that you learn when you work in the real world. And again, it's an interview question. Everybody I know, I'm an IT manager. When I interview people, I ask them this question as well, because I need to know what servers are running in my environment at whatever time it may be. So remember, just type in that output table and you'll be good to go. Again, you can also delete VMs from here as well if you wanted to. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down, and we're going to move on to our next lab. Now, somebody may come to you and say, right, I need you to create a container. And you'll go, okay. So you might come here and you type in CON. So we go to container instances. And especially if you're deploying stuff through Kubernetes, you're deploying web applications, you would use container instances. Sometimes your DevOps guys would do this. But again, it's something that I want you just to get an overview of it. So I'm not going to do anything major. We're going to create a simple container instance. by either clicking create over here, or we can say create container instance from here. Now, once our container instance pops up, it's going to ask us for a resource group. Every time you create something, it's going to ask for a resource group. So bear that in mind. If we're trying to keep all of our resources together, or you create a new resource group if you wanted to. So I'm going to go and paste in a name that I have here already. And that we're going to call that container instance 1. Now, by default, I can use the quick start images. I can use an Azure Container Registry, or for your developers out there that use Docker, we can use Docker if we needed to. We can come down here and we could change the size of our container if we wanted to, but that's okay. We're going to just leave it at the defaults for now, because the whole exercise is to get us familiar with deploying our first container. So if someone talks to you about container instances, you're not going to freak out and run and hide. You'll be able to say, oh, okay, I know what you're talking about. Now we go to networking. Now we have to give our container instance a name, and I like to keep it the same because I need to know what it is I'm deploying. So I can go ahead and we can say we're going to make this container public. We're going to give it a DNS label, and I'll just call that container instance 01 for the sake of this lab. And of course, we can add or open ports if we wanted to access that. We could go and add what we wanted to over here. I'm going to go ahead and click next. Now, of course, it's asking us, do we want to that container to restart on failure? Obviously, we'll just leave the defaults for now. We'll go next. And of course, you're not going to worry about tagging, and we're going to go ahead and create that container. It's going to go away and it's going to do a validation, and it's going to give us some information about it. And we're going to click create. And this is now going to deploy the container instance. So if someone says to you, I need you to create a container or deploy a container, it's like, well, it's the same thing in my mind. You know, deploy, create, the same thing. Just depends on it. Some people like to get you confused by making it sound complicated, when in reality, it's pretty easy if somebody just spends a bit of time with you and shows you how to do this. So now we'll just wait for this container instance to deploy. It shouldn't take long at all. And I'm going to close my notification down. And as you can see, your notifications build up and it tells us everything that we've done. I'm going to go ahead and dismiss this also, we don't get spammed by it. I'm going to click go to resource. Now you can see here, if I go to my resource, you can see it tells me I've got all my information. So I can go ahead and copy that. And let's go ahead and open up another page. And let's paste that in there and press enter. And there we go. Welcome to Azure Container Instances. So we've now deployed your very first container. That wasn't hard. It was really easy to do. So since we are feeling a bit brave, let's go and deploy a web app. Someone might say, oh, you need to deploy a web app. Now you go, don't know about that. You know, this was enough already for me. Again, it's not hard. If someone just takes the time to show you, then you can. And obviously you can go down here and you can see a whole lot of information that's going on about your container. Again, we've got locks where we can lock stuff to prevent accidental deletion. We can run our metrics against that container and see if we have any issues. And as you can see, it's starting to do some bits and pieces there. But now let's go ahead and deploy a web app. So we'll go and create, again, we could create a resource group if you wanted to. So let's create another resource group so that we get familiar with this. So I'm just going to get copy. I'm going to go ahead and say resource group. I'm going to click create. And I'm going to paste that in there. And we'll call this web app. And click create. And now what we want to do is we want to close that down and we want to go up here and type app services, because you want to look for our app services. So just type in app and you'll see app services there. So let's click on app services. Now we want to go ahead and we want to create our first web app. So again, pretty simple to do. We go and say create an app, and it's thinking about it. It's asking us for a resource group. So we go to our web app, and it's asking us for a web app name. I've got a name which I've pasted out in there. It's asking us for a runtime stack. So I'm going to use, if you had Docker, you could use Docker, but I'm going to go ahead and use the .NET Core 3.0, 3.1 for coding. It's not going to be a Windows system. It's going to be a Windows or Linux system. You can decide what you want to do. Again, we can go ahead and change the size here. If we clicked on the size, we could come through here, and you can see we'll get all sorts of things: production, isolated, dev testing. So let's dev testing. Hey, we're just testing. Let's go and press F1. It's free, you know. This is going to charge us some money. This is going to charge us some money. This is free. Hey, let's use the free one. We want to play. We want to get familiar with that. And you can see it's changed because it says it's the free size. We can go next. And of course, we can just leave that at the default. We don't want to enable stuff because we're not going out to GitHub to get our code. If you were a developer, you go out to Git and you could download your code and do stuff. We've got monitoring. We can go ahead and monitor that web app. If we felt the need to, you could turn that off. I'll just leave it on because we're going to delete it anyway. And I'll go ahead next and go review and create. And we'll click create. And again, it tells us it's free. It's not going to cost us anything. And that's the nice thing when we're learning. We don't want to pay for anything that we don't have to pay for. Again, guys, practicing and just playing in the portal, doing some fundamentals, finding a good mentor to guide you and help you and prepare you and break it down for you in simple English so that when you go ahead and deploy something, it's not too complicated and you don't get frightened or nervous because you don't know what you're doing. There's a lot of good information out there as well as a lot of bad information. Again, becoming a good engineer, you always need to ask questions. If you're not too sure, Google, do some research, ask those questions. And as you can see, that web app is deploying, and we'll just give it another couple of seconds to deploy. And then we will actually try and see if we can connect to our web app and see if our web app opens. Again, have a look at the notification up here. It tells you that the deployment is in progress. In case you don't read it there, you can always see it over here saying deployment in progress. So just be a little bit patient while that deploys. It shouldn't take too long to deploy. And then after this, we'll create a VNet quickly, and then we'll create a file storage group, and then we're almost done. So let this go through and deploy. So I hope you guys are finding it interesting. Some of you may have done this before. Some of you may not have done it. Those of you that have done it, please be a bit patient because people are learning. If you've never done it before, I hope you guys are learning something. At the end of the training session, I'll try to answer all of your questions that you have around Microsoft Azure. So hopefully, like I say, you guys are learning and having a bit of fun as we go along. If you have your Azure portal, you should, and you've been following along and you've logged in, you could actually have the same setup that I have. So I'm going to go ahead and just close that down. I'm going to go to resources. Now, once I go to resources, it gives me a whole lot of information about my web app. So let's go ahead and copy this URL. Let's open up this web page and let's paste it in there and let's press enter. And that's thinking about it. And there we go. Our web app has been deployed successfully. So what you've done now is you've created a container, you've accessed it, and you've deployed your first web application. Obviously, it's not a fancy application. It's just a simple Microsoft built-in app. But again, it gives you some fundamentals and it gives you some base understanding of how to deploy a web application. So as you can see, that was not hard to do. So that was pretty simple, not that hard. So We want to create a virtual network. Again, these are common things that you would get out and into. So we go to virtual networks. And of course, we can go ahead and say create. And we need to obviously choose a resource group. So I will throw it back into VM Labo 1. And I'll just call this demo. I'll just call it demo. Sorry, keyboard. Demo 2 VNet. Go to the IP addresses. I can select the default IP address. You could change that IP address if you want. By default, it's giving me a subnet. You could go ahead, if I clicked on the default subnet, I could go ahead and change that subnet if I wanted to, and I could call that subnet something else. I could call that subnet, I don't know, maybe demo VNet subnet, and I could click save, and I could go next to security. Obviously, we're not having a Bastion host, so we don't need Bastion. We don't need DDoS protection. We don't need a firewall. So we go next, review, and click create once the validation comes back, and we click create. And that's it. You've created your first VNet. It's not that hard to do. Now you can actually create your virtual machines and deploy them into that VNet should the need arise. So again, 2-minute job to create a VNet. Again, everything I'm showing you is what you would be asked to do when you go for an interview. I've got quite a few friends and engineers that work at Tata Industries, and they've had to do some hands-on labs in order to see what they know, because everybody wants to get a job as an engineer. So obviously the company, whether it be Microsoft or whether it be McVad or whether it be HP or whether it be even you applying for a role as an IT support person at the university or college, you still need to have these skills. So if I go to resources, we can come down here, and if I scroll down to my subnets, I can see there's my demo subnet. I've got 251 IP addresses. I could change stuff. I could add endpoints. I could set up with SQL. So there's a lot of things you can do within here. I could go ahead and add it to a security group should I find the need to do so. I could add a network gateway. So there's a lot of things that you can do with your creating your VNet. But that's how you create a VNet. Again, you've got DDoS protection, you've got firewalls, you've got security, you've got DNS. We compare 2 VNets together. If I go to the address space, you can actually see the address range of our VNets. Obviously, we're not having 65,000 devices connected to it. We could have did a /23 here, and that would have given us 512 addresses. So that's how you create a VNet. So not that hard. And now we're almost home and dry. Let's go and create a storage, because we want to create a file share and map that file share on my local machine as a Windows network drive, but it connected to Azure. That's pretty easy. The first thing we need to do is we need to create a storage account. So I'm going to go ahead and click create. And obviously I'm going to come down here and I'm going to choose the resource group where I want that to go in. And I'm going to call this, I'll call this a file.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir.
Yep.
Yeah. So it went a bit above the time. So if we can wind up till 6:30 and maybe continue the rest agenda in some upcoming sessions. Yeah.
Absolutely. So no, that's brilliant. So like I say, guys, go and do a bit of exploring, find out more about your virtual networks, creating storage accounts, and you'll get up and running with it, and it shouldn't take you too long at all. So I hope you guys have learned something, and I want to thank you for your time, and thank you for taking like I say, the time to watch, and hopefully you've learned something.
Yeah, I would really like to thank Mr. Ryan O'Connell, who spared his precious time for us and delivered such an informative session on the Microsoft Azure fundamentals. I'm sure that all students really enjoyed and learned a lot from this session. I'm certain that your knowledge will help them grow and understand the Azure cloud concept with utmost simplicity, accuracy, and clarity. I would also thank you all the learners who gathered here to learn about the Azure cloud and make the most of this beautiful opportunity. Now it's time to start the quiz. The winner of the quiz will get the 100% coupon off in the Microsoft AZ900 certification exam. So I'm just sharing my screen right now. I hope it's visible. So my screen is visible right now. Okay. Now it's visible. Okay. So guys, let's start the quiz. Before that, I will let you know the rules and regulation. Okay, so join the site play.kahoot.it or www.kahoot.it. After that, you can enter the pin 2767026. I repeat, the pin is 2767026. I'm waiting for you guys and then we start the quiz. Guys, the link in the chat box itself, please join it right now. The game pin is 2767026. I repeat 2767026. Let's wait for 2 minutes and then we start. Okay, it's 41 right now. 42. Okay, so let's start. All the best, everyone. Three, two, one, let's go. First question is, what are the roles in Microsoft Azure? Red for web role, blue for worker role, yellow for VM role, and green for all of these. What are the roles in Microsoft Azure? Red for web role, blue for worker role, yellow for VM role, and green for all of these. Okay. Seven people give the right answer. Let's see. Manib got 892 score. He is in the top. Now Vansh Grover 789, Karthik 754, Chirag 704, and Namrata 700. Congratulations, Manib, to, to answer the right question. Next. Second question is, which of the following web application can be deployed with Azure? Red for PHP, blue for ASP.NET, yellow for Python, and green for all of these. Which of the following web applications can be deployed with Azure? Red for PHP, blue for ASP.NET, yellow for Python, and green for all of these. 19 people get the right answer and give the right answer. Again, it's Karthik now, 1560, Chirag, 1445, Vansh Grover, 1435, Namrata, 1419, Rohan Nyati, 1249. So, Karthik, you get the right answer and you are on the top. Third question, how do you register a user control? Red for add source tag prefix, blue for add tag prefix tag name, yellow for add src tag prefix tag name, and green for all of these. 11 people give the right answer. Okay, so Kartik is still on the top, Chirag is on second, Vansh is on third, Namrata is on fourth, and Rohan Nyati is on fifth. Next question. Can we set up auto backup in Azure Web App? Blue for true and red for false. 31 people give the right answers. Kartik again, you're on top. He get 2393 score. Vansh Grover 2294, Chirag 2243, Namrata 2224, Shivam 1961. Kartik is on the top. Next question is, Azure was launched in red for 2008, blue for 2009, yellow for 2013, and green for 2006. Okay, only 7 people give the right answer. Okay, Namrata is on top. Then Chirag, then Vansh Grover, then Karthik, then LJ03. Reddish cache is a dash in Azure. Red for storage service, blue for compute service, yellow for analytics service, and green for database service. Okay. The right answer is database service. And 10 people give the right answer. It's again Namrata. Namrata, you are on top. Then Chirag. Then Vansh Grover. Then LJ03. And then Shivam. Seventh question. Which of the following VPN are supported by Azure? Red for site to site, blue for multi-site, yellow for point to site, and green for all of the above. All of the above is the right answer, and 29 people give the right answer. Let's see who is on the top. It's again Namrata, then Chirag, then Vansh Grover, then LJ03, and then Karthik. Last question. How many virtual machines can be deployed into a cloud service? Red for unlimited, blue for 25, yellow for 50, and green for 1. How many virtual machines can be deployed into a service? Red for unlimited, blue for 25, yellow for 50, and green for 1. Okay, the right answer is 50. Only 3 people give the right answer. It's tricky one, I guess. Now let's see who is on the top. Vansh Grover is third, Chirag is second, and first is Namrata. The winner of this quiz is Namrata. She get 3765 score. And second one is Chirag. He get 3594. And Vansh Grover, he get 3448.
So, as we come to the end of this insightful event, first of all, I would like to congratulate the winner of the quiz and also would like to thank Mr. Ryan for giving up the time from his busy schedule for giving the session. And also, I would like to shed some light upon the plethora of opportunities that await students of UPES CSA. We are ecstatic to present before you all the opportunity to be a part of UPS Cloud Security Alliance, the first student chapter under its Uttarakhand branch. We provide with you a variety of committees to choose from and an abundance of opportunities to avail that is directly provisioned by our collaborators like AWS Educate Student Community India, NVIDIA, Code Warriors, AWS User Group Dehradun, and Give My Certificates. And also, we would do the mentorship program, which is exclusively for our CSA members for enhancing your interpersonal skills to learning innovative technologies. Come to be a part of this community. The last date for the registration is 30th June. You can contact me, Vaishnavi, for the registration drive. I'm sharing the link in the chat box. You can simply fill out this link and be a part of UPS Cloud Security Alliance to avail such benefits. The link is here in the chat window. So, guys, thank you all. We will wind up the session. Thank you for joining. Hope you enjoyed a lot. And please don't forget to fill up the feedback form or the attendance form in order to be eligible for the certificate. The certificate will be sent to you via mail in the next 1 week. So, thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir. And thank you everyone for joining the session. I
Thank you,
hope you guys
everyone.
enjoyed. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for the time. And I hope you have a great day and a great week. And it was a privilege to spend time with you.